The first time I found tire tracks across my meticulously maintained lawn, I wrote it off as an accident. By the third time, I knew it was war, and in the battle between a retired military engineer and an entitled HOA board member with boundary issues, I wasn't going to be the one waving a white flag. I've always taken pride in my yard. Some might call it an obsession, but after 30 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, precision and order become second nature. When I retired and bought the modest ranch house at 47 Oakwood Drive, the first thing I did was restore the lawn to what I considered military-grade perfection. Evenly spaced irrigation, precise fertilization schedules, and mowing patterns that would make a golf course groundskeeper envious. My name is Frank Mercer, and at 62 I'd earned my peaceful retirement. My wife, Helen, passed away 5 years ago, just before my retirement, after a long battle with cancer. The lawn became my therapy, my way of creating order in a world that had taken my best friend and partner of 38 years. "You're out there more than you're in here," my daughter Melissa would joke during her monthly visits with my grandkids. "Dad, you need a hobby that involves actual people." "I have hobbies," I'd respond, gesturing to my workshop where I built intricate birdhouses and restored antique tools. "And I have my veterans group on Thursdays." What I didn't have was patience for inconsiderate neighbors, especially those who thought rules applied to everyone but themselves. Enter Patricia Harrington, treasurer of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association and self-appointed neighborhood supervisor. Patricia, never Patty, as she'd sharply corrected me during our first meeting, had moved into the large colonial across the street 2 years ago, following a divorce that neighborhood gossip suggested had left her significantly wealthier and significantly more bitter. Our first interaction had been pleasant enough. She'd brought over a "welcome to the neighborhood" basket, though I'd already been living there for 3 years when she arrived. The basket contained a copy of the HOA Covenant, highlighted in several places, sugar-free cookies, and a pamphlet for the local senior center. "The neighborhood has really gone downhill in recent years," she'd informed me within minutes of stepping into my living room, "but the board is working to raise standards again." I'd nodded politely, accustomed to diplomacy after decades of military service working with difficult personalities in high-pressure situations. "Your yard is quite green," she'd added, her tone suggesting this was both surprising and suspicious. "Though your mailbox doesn't meet the new guidelines we passed last month. I'll email you the specifications." I'd thanked her for the basket, replaced my perfectly functional black mailbox with the approved Oakwood bronze model that cost 3 times as much, and figured that would be the end of our interactions. I was wrong. It began on a Tuesday in April. I'd spent the weekend putting down new sod in a bare patch and was admiring my work while enjoying my morning coffee on the front porch. The spring weather was perfect, sunny but not hot, with just enough breeze to carry the scent of the flowering dogwoods that lined our street. That's when I noticed the tire tracks. Wide, deep impressions that cut diagonally across the corner of my lawn nearest the street, crushing a section of new sod I'd just laid. "What the hell?" I muttered, setting down my coffee to investigate. The tracks were fresh, the grass still struggling to right itself. Someone with a large vehicle had cut the corner, turning into my neighbor's driveway, using my lawn as an extension of the road. Judging by the width and depth, it was likely a large SUV. I frowned, surveying the damage. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was noticeable, at least to me. I'd need to water and roll that section to help it recover. Later that afternoon, while repairing the damage, I heard the distinctive rumble of a luxury SUV. Looking up, I watched as Patricia Harrington's white Cadillac Escalade swung wide around the corner and drove directly over the same section of my lawn before pulling into her driveway. She didn't even slow down. For a moment, I just stared, wheelbarrow of topsoil momentarily forgotten in my hands. Had she not seen me standing there? Was this an isolated incident of careless driving? I set down my tools and walked across the street. Patricia was extracting shopping bags from her vehicle, designer. Sunglasses perched on her immaculately highlighted hair. "Afternoon, Patricia," I called, keeping my tone neutral. She turned, giving me a quick once-over that took in my grass-stained jeans and work gloves. "Frank, how are you?" "I noticed you just drove across my lawn," I said, deciding on directness. "I'd appreciate it if you could keep your vehicle on the road." Her expression flickered between surprise and indignation. "Excuse me." "Your Escalade," I clarified, gesturing back toward the fresh tire marks. "You cut the corner and drove over my lawn. I just laid new sod there." She adjusted her sunglasses. "I barely touched the edge. It's practically the shoulder of the road." "It's not the road, though. It's my property." I kept my voice level, reasonable. "I put a lot of work into maintaining it." Patricia sighed, the sound heavy with exasperation. "Frank, I've had a very long day. The turn into my driveway is awkward, and sometimes I need a wider angle. It's literally 2 seconds of contact with what is, let's be honest, just grass. It grows back." Before I could respond to this dismissive assessment of my lawn restoration project, she continued, "Besides, as an HOA board member, I should remind you that the first 5 feet of your front yard is technically a utility easement. You don't actually have exclusive rights to it. Easement means utility companies can access it if needed," I corrected her. "It doesn't mean it's a public driving path." She waved a manicured hand as if physically pushing away my objection. "Let's not make a federal case out of this. I'll try to be more careful." Her tone made it clear the conversation was over as she gathered her shopping bags and clicked her way up her driveway in high-heeled sandals. I returned to my yard work, telling myself it was resolved. Patricia had acknowledged the issue, however reluctantly, and promised to be more careful. 28 years of military service had taught me to choose my battles, and this didn't seem worth escalating. 3 days later, I found fresh tire tracks in exactly the same spot. The second incident could have been an accident. Maybe Patricia had genuinely forgotten our conversation or had been distracted while turning. I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt and installed a small decorative border of white rocks along that section of my lawn. A gentle reminder that this was landscaping, not roadway. The rocks were displaced within a week, scattered across my grass like discarded breadcrumbs. "This is deliberate," I muttered, crouching to examine the new, deeper tire ruts that now marred my lawn. The displaced rocks had created additional damage as they were pushed into the soft turf. This time, when I crossed the street, Patricia was watering her flower beds, dressed in what appeared to be brand new gardening attire that still had creases. "From the packaging, we need to talk about my lawn," I said without preamble. She barely looked up. "Oh! You're still driving over it." I put in a rock border as a reminder, and now those rocks are scattered across my yard. Patricia turned off her hose and faced me. "Frank, I don't appreciate your tone. If your silly rocks got scattered, it wasn't my fault. Maybe neighborhood kids moved them." "I have a security camera on my porch," I lied. I didn't, but would soon remedy that oversight. "It shows your vehicle driving over my lawn yesterday at 3:42 p.m. This gave her momentary pause, but she recovered quickly. "Well, if I did clip the edge, I'm sorry. But frankly, you're being unreasonable about a tiny strip of grass that's practically in the street. Don't you have better things to worry about at your age?" My jaw tightened. My age has nothing to do with respecting property boundaries. "Look," she said with exaggerated patience, "I'll bring it up at the next HOA meeting. Maybe we need to review the street design in this section. The turn is awkward for larger vehicles. The street design is fine if you stay on it," I pointed out. She gave me a tight smile. "I need to finish my gardening, Frank. Why don't you email your concerns?" To the HOA board, we meet next Thursday. With that, she turned her back on me and resumed watering her already drowning petunias. That evening, I installed an actual security camera on my porch, angled to capture both my lawn and the street. Then I sent a polite but firm email to the HOA board describing the situation and requesting that all homeowners be reminded about respecting property boundaries. Patricia responded within an hour, to me directly, not to the board, with a terse message. Frank, your email has been received. Please note that the HOA board does not intervene in personal disputes between neighbors. I would suggest that if you're finding regular driving patterns in the neighborhood distressing, perhaps adding some hardscaping to that corner of your property would be a solution. Also, please remember that all external modifications require HOA approval. Regards, Patricia Harrington, Treasurer, Oakwood Estates, HOA. I stared at the email for a long moment, noting that she'd conveniently not copied the rest of the board. The implication was clear. She was using her position to dismiss my concerns and ensure they never reached the other board members. More troubling was the immediate pivot to requiring HOA approval for any solution I might implement, a process she clearly had influence over. The next morning, I submitted a formal application to the HOA Architectural Committee for protective hardscaping on the corner of my property. I kept the description vague, but included a rough sketch showing stone borders and reflective markers. While I waited for approval, I documented each incursion onto my property. Patricia's Escalade crossed my lawn with increasing frequency, no longer just when turning into her driveway, but also when leaving it. My security camera captured 4 incidents in a single week, each one leaving deeper ruts in the now struggling grass. My application was denied 10 days later. Dear Mr. Mercer, your application for hardscaping modifications has been reviewed and denied based on aesthetic inconsistency with neighborhood standards. Reflective markers in particular are not in keeping with the Oakwood Estates visual guidelines. Regards, Architectural Review Committee. The signature block didn't list committee members, but I'd done my research. Patricia sat on that committee too. It was time for a different approach. In the Army Corps of Engineers, I'd learned that every problem has a solution, and often the best solutions are elegant in their simplicity. I'd also learned that when diplomatic channels fail, you need to secure your perimeter. First, I documented everything. I compiled a dossier of security footage, photographs of the damage, email exchanges, and the rejected application. I made copies and stored them both digitally and physically. Next, I contacted my homeowner's insurance to report the repeated damage, making sure to name Patricia specifically in my documentation. I didn't file a claim yet, but established a record of the ongoing issue. Then I researched state and local laws regarding property boundaries, easements, and vehicle trespass. What I discovered was interesting. While utility easements did indeed exist in our neighborhood, deliberately driving on someone's property could still constitute trespass after the owner had explicitly denied permission. Armed with this information, I sent a certified letter to Patricia's home address, as well as to the HOA board as a whole. The letter was professional, referenced relevant statutes, included photographic evidence, and clearly stated that permission to drive any vehicle on any part of my property was expressly denied. I received no response from Patricia. The HOA president, a mild-mannered accountant named David Chen, called me 2 days later. "Frank, I received your letter about the lawn situation," he began cautiously. "I wasn't aware this was happening. I sent an email to the board 2 weeks ago," I informed him. "I never received it," he said, confusion evident in his voice. "Was it sent to the board's official email?" "It was," I confirmed. Patricia responded to me directly. There was a pause. "I see. Well, this is concerning behavior, if accurate. Have you tried speaking with her directly?" I detailed my conversations with Patricia, her dismissive attitude, and the rejected hardscaping application. "Let me look into this," David said finally. "The board doesn't normally get involved in neighbor disputes, but property damage is another matter. And I'm concerned about the communication breakdown." I thanked him and ended the call feeling cautiously optimistic. That optimism faded the next day when I found Patricia's Escalade parked partially on my lawn while she hosted what appeared to be a book club meeting. The vehicle's front tires were squarely on my grass, no longer just clipping the edge, but fully committed to the invasion. This was no longer accidental or even casually dismissive. This was deliberate provocation. I took photos from multiple angles, then walked to her front door and rang the bell. I could hear women's voices and laughter inside, but no one answered. I rang again and waited 5 full minutes before returning home. That evening, the Escalade was gone from my lawn, but had left deep impressions and damaged a sprinkler head. I added repair costs to my documentation. The next morning, I implemented Phase 2 of my plan. As a military engineer, I had designed defensive perimeters in some of the most challenging environments on Earth. Protecting a small section of suburban lawn would hardly be my most complex mission, but it required finesse. I needed a solution that would protect my property without being visible or creating liability issues. The answer came in the form of landscaping techniques I'd learned during a deployment where we'd needed to create vehicle deterrents that wouldn't be obvious to aerial surveillance. First, I dug up the damaged section of lawn completely. I measured and carefully excavated an area extending 3 feet in from the curb, covering the entire corner where Patricia consistently drove. In the excavated area, I installed a series of graduated terrain modifications, essentially structured dips and ridges made of compacted earth and gravel that would be imperceptible to the eye once covered, but would make driving over that section highly uncomfortable for a vehicle's suspension system. Nothing that would cause a blowout or accident, but definitely enough to create an unpleasant jolt and concerning noise. Over this, I placed a layer of densely packed gravel, then a commercial-grade landscaping fabric, followed by a special type of rigid mesh used in commercial landscaping to prevent soil erosion while supporting grass growth. When vehicles weighing less than 1,000 pounds passed over it, like lawn mowers or foot traffic, it would feel completely solid. But the weight distribution of a 6,000-pound Escalade would create a distinctly different experience. Finally, I laid fresh sod over the entire area, watered it thoroughly, and trimmed it to match the surrounding lawn perfectly. To the naked eye, it looked like I had simply repaired the damage from Patricia's repeated incursions. In reality, I had created a subtly booby-trapped lawn that would feel like driving over a series of speed bumps if an SUV tried to cut across. It uncomfortable but not dangerous, and completely invisible. I'd spent years designing solutions that used terrain itself as a defensive mechanism. This was simply a civilian application of military principles. Deter unwanted incursion without obviously militarizing the space. As a finishing touch, I installed a second, better concealed security camera with a wider angle, ensuring I would capture any reaction when my defenses were tested. Then I waited. 2 days passed with no sign of Patricia or her Escalade. I began to wonder if she'd somehow sensed my trap, or if David from the HOA had actually spoken to her. But on the 3rd day, while I was inside preparing lunch, my phone alerted me to motion on my new security camera. I watched in real time as Patricia's white Escalade approached the corner, swinging wide as usual, tires confidently mounting my lawn, and then abruptly juddering as the wheels hit the first of my subterranean terrain modifications. Even through the camera footage, I could see the SUV lurch uncomfortably. Patricia braked immediately, her vehicle now awkwardly straddling the curb, front wheels on my reinforced lawn. She rolled down her window and peered out with evident confusion. After a moment, she backed up slightly, then tried again, this time advancing more slowly, only to experience the same disconcerting rumble. For nearly a minute, she sat there, clearly trying to understand what was happening. Then, with obvious reluctance, she maneuvered her vehicle fully back onto the road and completed her turn without cutting the corner, finally pulling into her driveway entirely via the asphalt path intended for that purpose. I smiled as I watched her exit her vehicle and immediately walk across the street toward my lawn. She stood at the edge, hands on hips, staring at the grass as if it had personally insulted her. Then she nudged it tentatively with her foot, finding it solid and normal feeling under her negligible weight. Her confusion was evident even from a distance as she walked slowly along the edge of my lawn, occasionally pressing on the grass with her foot, finding nothing unusual. Finally, she looked toward my house with narrowed eyes before walking back to her own home. I saved the security footage and added it to my documentation file, then returned to making my sandwich, feeling more satisfied than I had in weeks. Over the next several days, I observed Patricia make 3 more attempts to drive over my lawn, each time meeting with the same jarring result. After the 4th attempt, she gave up entirely and began making the slightly wider turn necessary to stay on the road. I noted with some amusement that she now gave my lawn a conspicuously wide berth, as if it might suddenly rise up and attack her vehicle. A week later, David Chen called me. "Frank," he began, sounding somewhat awkward, "I wanted to let you know that Patricia has recused herself from your hardscaping application review due to a personal conflict. The committee has revisited your application without her input and approved a modified version." "That's interesting," I said mildly. "Actually, I've resolved the issue already." "You have?" He sounded surprised. "How?" "Let's just say I implemented some lawn rehabilitation techniques that seem to have discouraged driving on that section." A pause. "I see. Well, Patricia also mentioned she's been experiencing some unusual terrain issues with her vehicle recently. She was wondering if you might know anything about road damage in the area." "The roads seem fine to me," I replied, truthfully. "Though I have noticed she's keeping her Escalade entirely on the asphalt these days. Very considerate of her." Another pause, longer this time. "Right. Well, I'm glad things seem to be resolving themselves." "They certainly are," I agreed pleasantly. "By the way, I've been thinking of getting more involved in the community. When are HOA board elections?" 3 months later, I was elected to the Oakwood Estates HOA board as head of the Grounds and Maintenance Committee. My first proposal was a neighborhood beautification initiative, focusing on lawn care education and respect for property boundaries. Patricia Harrington resigned from the board shortly afterward, citing personal reasons. She sold her house 6 months later and moved to a downtown condo with, I imagine, considerably less lawn to navigate. As for my corner of lawn, it remains lush, green, and entirely untouched by vehicular traffic. Occasionally, new neighbors ask how I maintain such a perfect yard, and I'm happy to share my gardening tips, though I keep some specialized techniques to myself. In the Corps, we had a saying, "Essayons, let us try." Finding solutions to complex problems was always my specialty, and sometimes the most effective solution is the one your opponent never sees coming, even when they're driving right over it.